Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this late morning panel. We're excited to have you here. We are going to go on a fast-paced tour through India today, 1 year into the new Modi administration. My name is Brooks Entwistle. I am the partner and chief executive officer of Everstone Capital, a private equity firm based in Mumbai and Singapore. We have a terrific panel, and we're going to dig right in. Let me introduce our panel very briefly. You have more expanded resumes and CVs in the books and online. But on my right, Bhavesh Agarwal, the co-founder and CEO at Ola Cabs, founded in 2011. One of the truly amazing stories in India this year. To my left, your right, Praveen Chakravarti, strategic advisor to the Bombay Stock Exchange, a member of the TVS board, and many other panels and significant positions in India, as you will see. And then to my far left, Manjit Singh, the president of Sony Pictures Home Entertainment. We have entrepreneurs, we have multinationals, we have people from the finance sector, and we're going to cover the gamut as we dig through. This time last year at the Milken Conference, the election, one of the great experiments in democracy anywhere in the world, was underway. At this point, the election was not clear. It was perhaps assumed that there may be a Modi victory, but it wasn't clear. And then on May 15th, the famous tweet went out from Modi himself: India has won. And my first question to the panelists today: 1 year on, has India won? I'm going to ask each of the panelists, starting with Manjit, just to give a 1 minute, if you will, walk to the governor lunch view of how the Modi administration has done in year one.
Yeah, so I'm incredibly bullish about the prospects of India because a number of things have happened on the ground, and I'm going to frame it around the Prime Minister's slogan of Make in India, which is really referencing the manufacturing sector in India, where we hope to create 100 million jobs in the next 10 years and grow the sector from 15% of GDP to 25% of GDP. Now, there's sort of three basic things that need to happen to enable that. The first is infrastructure, which last year I talked about choking India. But and that infrastructure is roads, railways, ports, and electricity. And what's really encouraging is in this cooperative federalism that the Prime Minister has embraced, he's also embraced the 14th Finance Commission's recommendations, and fully 50% or more of the funds collected through taxation will now be allocated back to the states, which is where infrastructure really has to be developed. The second thing is ease of doing business in India. We rank 142 out of 189, I think, which is a pretty poor track record historically. But today, 2 weeks ago, we applied for online for registration for a new company that we were creating. 7 days later, we had it electronically available to us. No interference, simple, straightforward, really easy to do business. And the last thing is policy reform, which again the Prime Minister has started engaging on, both in terms of land reform, which has been an obstacle to infrastructure, but also to just development, and also in terms of initial labor reform. So I feel like we're starting a journey that's got 15 years ahead of it, but we're making a very positive start in this first year.
Praveen?
I'm going to somewhat answer your question in a slightly different manner, Brooks, if you permit me. I noticed the topic for the discussion is, can Modi turn the elephant around? And that tells me that there are inherently three assumptions in it, which is India is a slow-moving elephant. It needs to be turned around. And one person with the will can do it. And I'm actually going to kind of question, in some sense, all three assumptions, not entirely. And that, in a way, will answer your question about how we think the administration has done 1 year in. India is a slow-moving elephant, but also, just to give you a statistic, India's GDP growth rate has been in the 5 to 10% range for the last 20 years. During the Asian financial crisis, during the global financial crisis, and oil prices at 130 and back to 60. So it's an elephant, all right, but it's very hard to fall off a slow-moving elephant than a galloping horse. The second is it needs to be turned. And this notion that India can turn on a diktat is certainly something that needs to be kind of thought through a little bit more carefully. And that leads to the third point about can one person sitting in Delhi do it? And and that's where I think this notion of exaggerated expectations and perhaps misperceived notions of what a leader can or cannot do. At least all of you in America will understand or realize the notion of federalism. India is deeply federal in its polity. India has about 29 states. The top 12 states account for 80% of all GDP. Of the 12 states, Prime Minister Modi's ruling political party, the Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, is in power in only 3. So there is a lot that the Prime Minister can do, and there is a lot that the Prime Minister cannot do. What the Prime Minister can do is change the rhetoric. Change the rhetoric, be a brand ambassador for the country, and I think the Prime Minister has done fairly well in that aspect. In order to actually move that into execution phase, I think there's a lot more that needs to be done, and this is where perhaps we will have to wait and watch.
Great, terrific. You've been so busy in the last year building all the cabs, you may not have noticed, but what's your view on this first year in the administration?
So luckily or not, the tech industry doesn't have too big of an interface with the government. But I agree with Praveen. I think the main thing that the Prime Minister has done, and that's impacted my company and my industry very, very positively, is just change the rhetoric. The investor sentiment towards the technology industry and the internet industry in India has completely changed. Ola itself has raised close to $700 million in the past year. But I agree that a lot more needs to be done. One area, again, specific to me, which I've seen increasingly, is ease of doing business with the government. Like Manjeet said, when I now engage with a government minister or bureaucrat, it's a much more forward-looking, much more proactive and positive discussion to find solutions to help grow the industry rather than to do quick fixes or to do band-aids. So that's, those two things, I believe, in the past 1 year is what I've noticed.
Great. All right, thank you so much for the opening statements. We're going to dig in now as it relates to each of these in more detail. I want to go to growth and the actually underlying growth piece of this. Manjeet, your business, you run a global business now, you've run a big business in India. Just underlying growth in the last year and changes you've seen in the overall business.
Well, I'm focused on the entertainment sector, and clearly in India that is a huge growth opportunity and a huge investment opportunity. We are still creating new channels in India to cater to increasingly fragmented populations, but the fact is the country is young. I think I've said it before, 55% of Indians are below the age of 25, 75% of India is below the age of 35. Rising incomes combined with a young population mean the entertainment sector has been growing rapidly, and we're seeing it across all sectors, and the country is digitizing as we speak, which brings, again, fresh opportunities.
Great. If I was coming to you on growth, you think about the last year of just exponential growth with your business. How much of that can you attribute to the government itself versus just your execution and the sector you're operating in?
I think the growth we've seen and the growth the technology industry broadly is seeing is on the back of two things. One is investor interest. Capital is a big differentiator. And secondly, just the penetration of smartphones. It's just changed the complete landscape. To give some statistics, every year in India we sell around 80 to 100 million smartphones. And we sell 2.5 million cars in India. So it's just an order of magnitude different. And the smartphone is opening up so many more consumption categories for so many more people out there, citizens. And to an extent, it's related to the government, but also I think the fundamentals are there.
Great. Praveen, you talked about federalism. It's one of the topics as we talked on some of the prep sessions for this panel. It's a big issue for all of us as we think about the country going forward. It is a complex issue. It's often a part of the India story that people overlook. There are some 13 state elections coming up over the course of the next 2 years. Take the audience through and dig in a little bit deeper into this issue of actually execution in the country and what it means to execute at the federal level versus the state level.
Sure. Let me start with an anecdote. About 2 years ago, a large American hotel chain held its board meeting in Mumbai, and I was asked to go meet the board. And we were talking about, this was before the elections, Brooke. And when I asked the board members who did they meet and how's their India trip been, and they had met all the right people, the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, the Central Bank Governor, and all of that. And I said, so how many hotels do you have in India? And they said 6. Can you name the chief ministers of the states that you have your hotels in? And they couldn't name even one, not even Maharashtra, which is where Mumbai is. And the reason I point that out is, and I said, presumably for you to for you to do business in India, to open new hotels, you'd need land, labor, the classic economic factors of production, and capital you don't need because you're bringing that in. Land and labor are what we call in India state subjects, predominantly state subjects. The state makes the decision on land laws. And by land, I also mean water and power and all of those things. And I said, if those are essentially what's called state subjects, wouldn't you rather spend your time meeting the heads of the different states that you want to open hotels in? And I'm only using that as an illustration to point out that India is very deeply federal, but somehow this misperceived notion that a lot of decisions happen in Delhi continue to be very prevalent. And so coming back to your point about elections, and I said that in my opening statement, the top 12 states account for 80% of GDP, but the ruling political party at the center is in power in only 3 of the 12 states. So, and that is where what the English media calls policy paralysis is essentially being able to work very closely and cooperatively with the states. And I think there is a sense that Prime Minister Modi could have done more in being able to work with the states, especially the states in which his party is not in power. So the 13 state elections, and India is in a permanent campaign mode, like Sidney Blumenthal wrote in his seminal 80s book here. So in that sense, there will be elections every year. But these state elections are going to determine how closely the Prime Minister and his government in Delhi can actually work with the states to promote what Manjeet referred to as cooperative federalism.
Great. You know, one of the things I think that's been said about this first year of the administration is, in many cases, there's been terrific movement to change the plumbing of the bureaucracy, to put things in place, whether it's moving files more quickly, whether or not it's combining ministries, to get the whole infrastructure moving. What I'm trying to dig into now, and I want to do with each of the panelists, is to try to give the audience 1 or 2 specific examples of reforms you've seen in your businesses on the ground. And that can be directly attributable to the government itself in the last year. There's a lot of talk, and again, the first year about all these things that have happened, all this movement, but let's get specific about specific reforms.
Sure. So in my case, in December, there was this incident about, with Uber in Delhi.
Yeah.
And I personally feel the government was very proactive about it, especially Transport Ministry. Transportation in India is a concurrent subject. Again, you have to engage with the states and the center. The Transport Ministry has been fairly positive about it, future focused. They know the value this industry can bring to the society at large with, growing micro-entrepreneurship and providing a different transportation solution to the cities. And our engagement with the government has been very, very positive, to the extent that now they're coming out with a policy for companies like ours, which will be forward-looking, which in my view is actually one of the best in the world.
Outstanding. Manjeet?
Similar experience. We're finding that the government has now set time limits for all approvals. So we get our approvals within a time limit, and there aren't any delays the way there used to be. So getting a license to broadcast a channel in India could have taken you a year, now it takes 60 days. So again, very positive steps in terms of just moving things quickly and cutting through the red tape. As our Prime Minister famously said, it's laying out the red carpet rather than the red tape.
Right. You're on the board of several big companies. Talk about maybe some regional examples of things you've seen.
Yeah, at least I'm on the board of one of South India's large conglomerates. And I mean, I think it's the power of the rhetoric again. Even if the administration or the Prime Minister has not issued a notification saying move files faster, the fact that he's talking about it and making a big issue of it puts some fear in the administration, and that has certainly helped. But in the capital market side, I must say there's been a lot of reforms, Brooks, and as something that you perhaps have experienced. In India, foreign investors have invested about $180 billion in equities in the 21st century. Domestic Indians bought $180 billion of gold in the same time frame. So there's been a huge issue of how do you channelize domestic household savings. India saves 35%. how do you channelize that to more productive uses? And actually, for the first time, this government has actually come up with a gold monetization program. So things like that, where they quickly pick on a problem and come up with a policy measure. You could argue whether it's the right one or the wrong one, but at least they've taken the first step, and so that is commendable.
Great. So specific examples across each, which is terrific. You talked about the power of the rhetoric, and one of the things we'd be remiss before we move on to the next topic is just to discuss the impact of Mr. Modi on India's reputation globally. It's been an unbelievable show of diplomacy around the world. There may be people in the room that were part of the Madison Square Garden gathering. There are certainly people that will be at a large gathering in Shanghai, which will take place on May the 16th, similar vein and feel to a big crowd. And then there's been just a significant number of trips out and state visits in as well. I just want a quick shot across the panel. Grade you will give the Modi administration on just upping India's profile within the neighborhood and across the globe. Praveen?
Well, I've said it before. I think certainly an A+ as far as positioning India on the global map. But of course, that's, we back in India are not satisfied with just that. We actually want to see some more action on the ground. And so for that, we'll wait and watch.
Yeah, I would concur. I mean, I think the very first gesture of inviting the neighbors to the Republic Day parade was a huge step. To his inauguration was a huge step. And then having President Obama at the Republic Day parade really gave a sense to India of its global position and importance. And I think his visit to New York and Washington was fantastic. So it's very, very positive.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think it's the rhetoric and the changing mood has benefited me, the industry, and the tech industry and the broad industry completely. And not just the overall rhetoric, but things like Make in India, Digital India, 100 smart cities. All these are still concepts right now which need to be developed out and built out by the industry. But still, I think just the fact that the government is very well directioned now, it's very beneficial.
Yeah. We'll all watch the China visit with great interest. Let's talk about and dig into sectors now. This is actually be a big part of the panel. It's important. We have a very rare collection of individuals on this panel to talk deeply about sectors that have been a big topic around this conference as well: technology, entertainment, and the like, from a variety of different perspectives. And so I'm going to give our channelists the ability to kind of go a bit deep here on this. And I was referring back as we walked over here to the fact that my original move to India was a result of Praveen, because as it turns out, in the late 90s, he was an investment banker who took Infosys public and worked on that deal. And as a result, the firm where I was working at the time, Goldman Sachs, decided they needed a tech banker in Asia to cover India, and I got the one-way ticket to India. So thank you. It started off a wonderful time and exposure of living in India. But at that time frame, in the early tech boom, so the first tech boom, the late 1990s, as you came into India, into the Mumbai airport, people will remember from that time the way you would dictate the amount of capital flowing in or the activity level on the ground was just the sheer number of billboards of .com companies on the way down to the Oberoi in South Mumbai. And once those billboards went away, you knew it was sometime late 2000 and the boom was off. This time is very different.
I hope so.
We hope so as well. Exactly. But let's talk about that. Why is it different now? And let's talk about it from the entrepreneur standpoint. We want to talk about it from a market standpoint, and also talk about it from a multinational standpoint. So let's start with an entrepreneur. Sure. And tell us a little bit about it. Back up a little bit on the story of Ola. It's an extraordinary one.
So when I started Ola, my dad actually said, "Are you becoming a travel agent?" And I was fairly young then. I started 23. And I was just out of college, had just finished my first job, 2 years at my first job in Microsoft. And so that was the society's attitude back then, and I'm from a small town city. But things have changed dramatically, and I think the reason things have changed are predominantly because of smartphone penetration. It's just, people have got a device. In many ways, technology has helped India leapfrog many old world paradigms. Things like offline retail, things like desktop internet, things like, in my particular industry, things like car ownership. To give you a overall view of how car ownership is in India. In the West, 70% people own cars, and the narrative of what Uber and other companies are saying is you don't need to buy a second car, or you need to sell off your first car. In India, only 5% people own cars, so there is no car ownership, and the road infrastructure and the public transit infrastructure is fairly bad. And if you've ever been to India, you know how crowded the streets already are with 5% people owning cars. So India will leapfrog car ownership at a mass scale and directly get into this transportation as a service economy. And I think it's primarily possible because of the rise of smartphones.
How about just building the company itself and people and all these sorts of things that we hear about as it relates to the Valley and Los Angeles, all these places around the world where companies being created. How have you found that in India right now, the whole environment?
When we started off, it was startups and technology was not the in thing then in 2010, 11. But over the past 2-3 years, there's been a lot of interest in joining a startup, working for a startup, which is changing the way Indians themselves consume different goods. And to the extent that now we get so many inbound requests from people in the Silicon Valley wanting to come back. And that's, I think, a sign that something is actually going very well.
Extraordinary. We'll keep coming back to this topic. Let's go to the multinational view on the entertainment side. Just tell us a little bit, Manjit, just the state of the entertainment industry. It's obviously booming right now, but give us some of the latest scoop.
The entertainment industry is booming, and as a multinational, our parent company in Japan has identified India as a growth market, both for entertainment as well as for the electronics product, which is a very significant growth opportunity on both sides. What we're seeing is there's huge growth in digital, and I concur. It's largely based on cell phone usage, and so a big sporting event like the IPL, which is our cricket event, the first day had 6 million views, uniques going to the website on their digital phones, which was 6 times what it was a year ago. So there's a huge growth opportunity on digital. The country itself is digitizing, which means you're going to be able to actually count subscribers, and so the dual stream of revenue, not only being advertising based for broadcasters, but also having subscription revenues is coming into play in a significant way, and subscription revenues are growing, so that's again a positive, added to the digital revenues, which are also growing and building engagement with viewers. So we look at the market there and view it as an incredible opportunity to continue to invest, and that's very much the view of our parent company. Is we plan to significantly invest and grow our business in India.
Yeah, I mean, the power of the phone, Brooks, I mean, really the power of putting a smartphone in almost every Indian hand is literally transforming everything, and it has a very tangible GDP impact, as many studies have shown. I wish, there was I saw the former telecom minister, Milind Deora, in the conference yesterday. I wish he was here to answer. He probably would have been the best person to have answered this question. But seriously, the power of the phone that, as Bhavesh alluded to, I think that's fundamentally transformational. Now, is this time different as far as valuations are concerned? Well, I'm not so sure.
Let's stay on this. You have a unique seat, on the stock exchange. You see the market development. You're involved in initiatives around the markets. Exits, obviously critical to this whole story. There's actually been a reasonable dearth of IPOs that have come out despite all this activity, despite the market's run. Tell us what's being done around this. What are you doing around the industry, and some of the thoughts in that front?
Yeah, so the IPO market in India, and just to put things in context, Bhavesh's 2-year-old company has raised more money from foreign investors than the entire IPO markets in the last 3 years put together. And this was a time when the markets actually doubled. So there is a lot of secondary market activity, but there is a dearth of primary market issuances. And it's one of those baffling mysteries because the way the Indian capital markets is structured is predominantly foreign investor driven. Foreign investors own more than half the free float of the Indian capital markets. In fact, I wrote an op-ed joking that maybe we should close our exchanges for July 4th rather than August 15th. And I'm only being a little facetious here because it is a big problem, because we're not able to, and today we run the real risk of exporting away our capital markets, our IPO markets primarily. And the reason I call it baffling is it's exactly the same set of investors that buy IPOs on the NASDAQ or on the NYSE that trade in India, but they don't buy IPOs in India. And so when Bhavesh's company, should they choose to go list on the NASDAQ, they'd be talking to pretty much the same set of investors as they would if they chose to go IPO public on the Bombay Stock Exchange. So the Securities and Exchange Board has a committee called the Primary Markets Committee, and I sit on that committee. And we're trying to come up with various policy measures to attract IPOs. But we've just put out a paper that will ease regulations for smaller venture capital-backed IPOs because there was a general feeling that perhaps the IPO regulations are onerous. So we've eased that. We've tried all kinds of measures, but we still haven't seen an uptick in IPOs. And I'm afraid I can't give you a concrete answer today as to when it'll pick up.
We've been very focused on technology, entertainment, just given the nature of the panelists. But I mean, you also sit there and see a variety of other industries, whether they come through the regulation process or the listing process. Give us a sense of other industries that are doing well in this last year and in the new regime.
So India is a big domestic consumption market. So consumer companies are always doing very well. Healthcare, which is an offshoot of consumption, they do very well. And the appetite for consumption-oriented IPOs and stocks is extremely high. So you will find, I think, Indian healthcare companies are perhaps the most expensive in the world in terms of valuations. And that's because of a scarcity premium. There's a huge appetite for consumption-oriented stocks, and there is not as much appetite for capital expenditure, capital goods type of companies. So there's a bit of a tilt there. But if you want me to pick sectors, it'll largely be FMCG and healthcare.
Right, great. Our own fund, if I look at the sectors that we've invested in, it very much is a consumer focus as well. Whether it's a restaurant business, the education business, the women's clothing business, women's cosmetic business, it really is a play on consumer as well. So I completely agree with that. Let's talk a little bit. We've been very positive on this panel. It's obviously an amazing story. It's been an amazing year. I want to dig into two topics. One is just the regulatory environment to the extent it's not helpful. And then second, to get a view from each of the panelists on the biggest couple of bottlenecks you're facing away from some of the positives that we've talked about. So, let's stay with you very quickly, just to stay on the same theme as it relates to the market, the regulator, regulations that haven't been changed that need to, from your perspective.
Regulations that need to be changed, is that the question?
Yes.
From a market perspective, I think we really need to tackle these two problems, which is channelizing household savings into more productive uses. And I think that's supremely critical, especially because the market's so reliant on foreign capital. If the US Fed starts to tighten rates here, we're very worried about what kind of an impact that'll have on the Indian capital markets. So channelizing that into better uses is certainly very, very important. And the second thing that we've already talked about, which is the structure of the capital markets, which today derivatives markets, which is not your stock trading but futures and options trading, that's 20 times larger than actual stock trading, and a large part of it is speculative in nature. And we have a feeling that perhaps is one reason why the primary market is not taken off, because the market has this overall characterization of being very speculative. And how to shift that without disturbing the dynamics and without being regressive in terms of foreign investor taxation or any of those things, I think those are two really big challenges.
Very good. Manjit, just talk about bottlenecks in your business, despite the fact that it's booming, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a slightly different tact on it. I mean, I think one of the big concerns we always have is the legal system, because that is a huge bottleneck still, and enforcement of contracts takes extraordinarily long periods of time and is virtually impossible to get done in a manner that really values the sanctity of contracts. And those kinds of issues don't seem to be getting better. The judiciary is completely backed up, and it takes years to get anything through the system. The other thing that we always are concerned about as an entertainment company, and fortunately now I think our colleagues in Bollywood are joining us in the concern, is the lack of respect for intellectual property. I mean, there is rampant piracy in India, as talking about what I do now, which is home entertainment, which is DVDs and Blu-rays and downloads. There's virtually no market for that in India at all anymore, because it's all pirated. And we would like to see better enforcement of laws that are already on the book, because right now there is virtually no enforcement.
What bottlenecks for you all?
The one thing I would say is more spectrum needs to be opened up. If you go to India, especially small town India, the speeds of data on your phone are really bad. Even in large towns, there are just pockets of good coverage. And in general, and it's not even 4G country yet, it's just 3G. 3G is like a luxury. The more spectrum opens up, consumption on the mobile will just increase non-linearly with it. And I think that's the one thing I would say in my industry.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's no question from just a pure demographic standpoint. We talk about the demographic dividend and India's young population. The obvious corollary there is the fact that the number of jobs that need to be created every year is simply extraordinary. The other thing that I want just the panel's view, given that it is the Milken Conference and we do talk about a variety of other issues here, is this incredible statistic that despite the fact that 50% of the people still live on the land in India, the percentage of GDP actually coming out of agriculture in the rural areas is really 15% or thereabouts. So urbanization, while happening, is happening slowly. And while most of the business we're talking about are reaching some of these urban populations, I'd love the panel's view on how in their individual seats they're talking about these next third, fourth tier cities in the rural markets. From just an entertainment standpoint.
The relationship with land in India is very different because people own the land, unlike, say, in China. So there is a real bonding with the land, and while one son may go to the city, the other sons will stay and till the land and keep to the village life. So there is a fundamental attachment to land which causes the speed of urbanization in India to be significantly slower than perhaps what's expected. I don't see that changing dramatically, and it is true in some parts of rural India, conditions are very poor, and it is extremely tough and extremely difficult. So while we've created a middle class of, arguably 600 million people, there's still 300 million people in rural areas living below the poverty line, which means it's a struggle just to exist, and that is changing, but changing slowly.
How many cities are you in now with Ola, and what does that growth pattern look like over time? How deep will you go?
So we're in 100 cities. So while I'm not an expert on land, but in the smaller towns in India, when we launched the smaller towns, I was not very confident that it'll be a very big scaled up operations in those cities. But I was very pleasantly surprised by this, the amount of consumption that we saw in the small towns. Top 20 cities beyond, the towns are actually, the population is not that low actually. India has 50 cities with a million plus population, 100 cities with a 500,000 plus population. And in those cities, infrastructure is equally broken. Density of population is equally high because there are people everywhere. And the middle class is there, the consumption need is there, but they don't get alternatives of consumption. So we've seen tremendous growth in these small towns.
Right. Forget about your perspective, given your various fingers in these various elements in other parts of the country. How do you think about addressing this rural versus urban issue?
On one hand, I do think the rural-urban divide is a little bit exaggerated. The rural wage growth has actually been at one of its highest in the last decade or so. And just to give you another statistics, India's GDP is actually doubled in the last 5 years, and it's gone up 4 times in the last 15 years. The number of taxpayers has stayed constant at 35 million. 35 million pay taxes. What that only tells me is that there is a lot of consumption and income that's not accounted for in the formal way that we measure it normally. And that only shows up through consumption, and that's why I said, consumables, and when Bhavesh talks about demand and being in 100 cities, clearly there's a demand there. But if you actually look at it from a formal GDP perspective, it's not accounted for. So that's why I'd actually take some of these numbers, with a grain of salt. About 15% of GDP is agriculture and all of that. But having said that, the point that Manjeet made about people owning land, and I think that actually is what really led to rural consumption being at its highest in the last 10 years or so. So owning land is an asset for those that actually are not as emotional about it and are willing to give it up in return for cash. they are actually going out and spending and consuming, and that shows up in the economy. So to some extent, it's both a good and a bad thing. While people own land, it's very hard to put up manufacturing, to put up factories, and actually have to go and pay market price, or in many cases more than market price, to acquire that land. But it also bridges what you call the rural-urban divide.
Right.
If I could just
please
say, I think that there's three Indias. There's the large towns. There's the small towns, which is really where the growth is happening. I mean, that's where the growth is happening, the first tier of urbanization from the village. And then there's the village that still exists as a village. And where I would disagree with my friend here is the villages are still really in many ways in dire straits, despite schemes like Narendra, which gives people 100 days of work for at 100 rupees a day, which is about $2 a day guaranteed by the government. Even with those programs, that population hasn't really been impacted by the growth overall of India.
Great, very good point. Thanks for adding that. Just for the audience, we are going to take Q&A. We've got a few minutes left here, so if people could get questions ready, we'll get a mic around in a second. But before we get there, let's stay on this vein as it relates to this issue, at what price growth, and some of the underlying social issues that may come under pressure as it relates to this new government and this growth. In my own household, we're an interesting couple with my wife and I, who both lived in Mumbai for many years. My business is a private equity business, but my wife's business is a nonprofit that she founded in Mumbai and Calcutta that's in the business of helping young ladies that have come out of the sex trade into the rehab process. It has become much more difficult in the nonprofit sector, especially a foreign nonprofit, to do business in India, to get licensed, to get visas, to get funds in the country. And I think that's true across the NGO sector in general. Now, there are some pressures. And I'd just be curious, across this panel, I want to talk about two things from this group. Number one, if you see that, and if you have a view on this at what price growth, but also from a CSR standpoint, broadly defined, what you and your own capabilities and own companies are doing to maybe address some of these issues. But should we start with you? Sure. Given the incident you referred to in Delhi with one of your competitors, obviously this has been top of mind for your sector.
Mm-hmm. So I don't think the growth is impacting. I mean, at least in my view, it's not growth versus social success. But given the business model that we operate, we actually don't own any cars, right? We enable micro entrepreneurship at scale. And when we engage with the government, we actually work very closely with both state and central, all state governments and central governments in helping more and more drivers get to own cars. The government actually, in many cases, finances the car for the driver. We've been working with many state governments, Maharashtra government, Tamil Nadu government, where they're financing the down payment of the car. So I think in general, I feel it's in the positive direction.
Okay. And from the standpoint of just initiatives within the company, it's early days. Obviously, you're running hard, but are there things that you're doing with your employees or in the communities from a CSR standpoint?
We're a startup still.
Yeah, still, exactly. Would expect.
We're focused on growth, but I believe given the business model, the growth is impacting a lot more drivers increasingly. Yep. We have close to 200,000 drivers on our platform. We have 90% market share in India. Our goal is to get to 1 million driver entrepreneurs in the next 2 years, and that's more than 1 million families impacted with that. And these drivers are actually the strata of the society that gets affected a lot by any wrong policy or anything.
That's extraordinary impact. Just quickly, have you had to do anything or wanted to do anything or put in policies in place that relates to women and safety, given the incident in Delhi?
Sure. So we've actually been working with the government and actually going beyond what the government wants us to do. All our cab drivers are background checked, third-party background verified, police verified. When this happened, I learned that many states in India don't even offer police verification as a service. So we've been working with states to help them to start offering police verification as a service. And that's on the process side. On the product side, we've put an SOS button inside the app. Consumers can share the rides with their loved ones just to make sure they can call the police directly from the app. So there are a lot of things we've done. Safety is definitely top of agenda for us, and we need to ensure people are safe.
Terrific.
Yeah. Actually, talk about social issues, Bhavesh. I'm surprised you didn't mention the recent incident where a passenger wanted a certain driver of his own car. Maybe you should.
Sure.
That's a fantastic example.
We actually get requests like these all the time. So recently, a passenger tweeted to us saying that, can I get a Hindu driver? And we said we don't discriminate based on religion for our drivers. And it actually, we were trending on Twitter for 2 days. That was not the intent. I mean, the intent is just,
right.
We are a very equal opportunity kind of a company. And that's how India is in a general way. Yeah.
Manjeet, let's go to you next on this topic.
Sure. So if you look at societal change in India, probably the single biggest factor that has driven change has been television. And it has been television and the general entertainment provided on television that has shifted society, we believe, in a very positive way and made some really positive changes. And we have addressed issues like the Delhi case through our programming and really laying out the issues and things like that. It was, by the way, one of the highest rated programs. So certainly we believe in the power of television to move society. And I think as broadcasters, we have a responsibility to use that power wisely. In terms of corporate social responsibility, the government mandated a 2% of profits be spent on corporate social responsibilities. And again, as a multinational, we're complying with that and picking charities that are of interest to our employees, where our employees not only provide money, but can actually work in the charity. And so we've been quite active with local charities in the cities in which we operate in India.
That's great. Praveen.
I actually want to talk about social issues in the context of federalism and the role of the Prime Minister and his government. And I actually am one that believes that in a country like India, the primary role of the Prime Minister and his central government is actually more social than economic, to ensure that there are no fault lines that open up. India is, the notion of India being one country still baffles many people because it's just incredibly diverse and complex. So, and that I think should be the core of a leader in Delhi. And on that, I think, yes, there are some cases that have kind of, I think, a larger part of it is exaggerated by the media, I would think. But I do see a certain shift in direction in terms of focus from economic to social issues. On the issue of CSR, corporate social responsibility, as Manjeet mentioned, India has actually put down a rule that says 2% of the average profits of the last 3 years of companies have to be put into corporate social responsibility activities. So the BSE, the Bombay Stock Exchange, just actually launched today or yesterday in India, perhaps the world's first CSR exchange to help companies meet that and comply with that 2% rule.
Tell us a bit more about that. I was going to bring that up, but just give us more specifics on how that's going to work and what that may drive from the standpoint of just getting better NGOs, nonprofits, and other efforts into the system. Yeah,
so what we thought was, we said, now that there is a rule, there are over 2 million nonprofit or non-government organizations in India. There are about 1,294 listed companies on the Bombay Stock Exchange that will have to spend close to about $12 billion in corporate social, just in 1 year. Now, to be able to act as a trusted intermediary that can help companies choose an NGO based on whatever program they would want in terms of geography, in terms of issues, we said we built a technology platform, and we took a very market approach to it. Just as companies list on a stock exchange, we said NGOs can now list on the exchange. And it'll obviously go through a certain verification process, just like companies do for an IPO. And we would open that up for corporates, and that can then be, as investors, that can choose which NGO to fund and all of that. And we are hoping that the market mechanism will take over in being able to allocate and channelize the CSR funds in a more efficient manner.
It's a great initiative. Let's go to the audience now. We've got about just a little bit over 10 minutes left. We've got lights up front, so I'm going to take the first couple. I see a gentleman 4 rows back. Just wait for the mic, and if you want to address your question to a specific panelist, otherwise we'll field it.
Yeah, generally, when you were talking about the bottlenecks and issues in India, I was surprised not to hear a mention of infrastructure. When you think about India, you've got a massive urbanization over the next 15 years. It's estimated about 100 million people will be moving from the rural environments into the urban environment. And the friction in the urban environments due to lack of infrastructure is astounding. And I'd be interested in the views of the panel on what needs to be done to improve infrastructure in the major urban environments of India, and what role can the private sector play through public-private partnerships, and what needs to be done to improve that linkage that's happened in some other major markets around the world.
You want to take that to IDFC?
Yeah. So there are 2-3 questions in it, and try and do that quickly. I think urbanization and the need to build cities has actually been directly addressed by the Prime Minister in what he has unveiled is called the 100 Smart Cities Plan. But the larger question when it comes to actually execution, and the big question is one of financing, and you raised that issue, which is the PPP, the public-private partnership. The general feeling now in India is the 10 years of PPP regime has not worked. Yeah. There is a very strong incentive mismatch between what the private sector wants and what the state wants in terms of infrastructure rollout. And to be able to kind of build roads and highways and trains and all of that entirely through the private sector is almost kind of unimaginable. So for the first time, if you look at the Chief Economic Advisor's report this year, they've actually questioned the very concept of PPP and said financing perhaps should be entirely done by the state and execution can be done by the private sector. Now, if you then say financing by the state, then all kinds of other issues crop up, which is where's the money going to come from? What about asset liability mismatch? Because infrastructure projects are long gestation projects. You cannot fund them with bank financing. So there are all kinds of other issues. But I would say that the debates now fairly moved away from PPP to state finance private execution of infrastructure projects.
Yeah. I think if you look back at the initial business plans of private equity firms that came in the mid-2000s or investment banks that set up this infrastructure business was a big focus. And I think not to the fund or to the bank, but it's been quite disappointing and very difficult for this exact reason. So I think that's a great way of framing it. I'm going to go, there's a question, I'm getting through the lights, 2 rows back with a hand up there, please.
Question, I have the microphone here. In the back.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Question for Brooks and Praveen. I mean, you've touched upon India's significant reliance on FDI. Arun Jaitley, others in the ministry have been on record that India should not be a zero-tax destination for foreign investors. And so in the need to, increase tax revenue, wondering your thoughts on how this plays out and whether or not, if the noose tightens around Singapore, Mauritius, other destinations for inflows, whether or not that has a significant effect on capital flows.
Yes, it is excessively, in my view, reliant on foreign capital, both in terms of foreign direct investment and foreign institutional investment. See, I think the taxation, I think the finance minister, in my view at least, what he said was India is no tax haven. India is not, Mauritius. But I think what foreign investors are looking for is more stability and predictability in tax policies. And I see no reason why that would change dramatically. And if anything, the current government has actually gone ahead and said that they would not appeal against Vodafone's claims on taxes that were charged and all of that. So I actually think we're moving to a regime that will be more predictable. Now, would the tax rate be 15%, 30%, or 0%? That's, I think, entirely a function of what the government wants to do in terms of tax revenues. But to argue that there should be 0 is perhaps not going to work as well as far as the current establishment is concerned.
Great. I will go the question there. There's the mic. Thank you. And we'll come to you, sir, next.
Hi, Kathy Matsui from Goldman Sachs in Tokyo. Hi, Brooks.
Hey, Kathy.
Listening to your comments on the panel, it's very encouraging. On the one hand, it sounds like Modi is pursuing kind of a Modinomics agenda, just like Abe is pursuing an Abenomics agenda. My question, though, is on the geopolitical ambitions of your country. And I know that, for example, Prime Minister Abe and Modi have talked a lot about this subject, especially on the defense side of things. But how do you guys see, from your vantage points, India's role in the region going forward? I know it's very complicated with relations with China and the upcoming visit, but just curious to hear your thoughts.
Do you want to take?
Sure. I mean, I think India views itself quite correctly with 1.2 billion people as a global superpower and wants to be recognized in that role. And what the Prime Minister did in the initial phases was trying to establish a relationship in the region itself that would give India a more prominent role. And with the events in Nepal, you're seeing how quickly India is reacting to neighbors' issues and things like that. And I think that that's just an indication of ambition to be counted as one of the superpowers as we go forward. And much of the growth that he talks about is geared to making us a global manufacturing power. I talked about the few things that have happened at the start, but he's talking about industrial corridors, 100 smart cities. He's talking about really building India's manufacturing base from where it is today, 15% to 25%, and really changing the nature of our exports to have a much bigger component of manufacturing in there. So there is definitely a strategic ambition to be a regional superpower and a global superpower.
I think this point, which we referenced earlier, this notion of, if you think about the Japan visits, the neighborhood visits and going deep, and then China and the pivoting on the U.S., it's been an extraordinarily muscular outreach. And now the question is how you follow that up. We have a question from the gentleman in the front here. Mike's coming right here.
With all the discussions, the fact that resources and such limit what can be provided to the people and to the country, I've heard no discussion of population control. And it seems to me this is an issue that many countries, particularly India, have got to face. And yet there's been in this discussion here today no mention of it. And I wonder your comments on that issue.
Somebody want to take that?
I mean, I think the way to address that is certainly not going to be by a diktat in India. I mean, India just doesn't function that way in terms of population control. But it goes back to the power of rhetoric.
Can you summarize the question? Because it was very hard to hear what you asked.
Sure, thank you. The mic was breaking up. The notion of the gentleman commented that there's been no mention of population or population control as part of the panel today. So we respond to that quickly.
Yeah, so it's not going to be through a diktat or any of that, but it is about the power of the rhetoric again, and the Prime Minister has actually talked about emancipation of the girl child. So it is about making people aware and getting people educated, and through messages, and that's really the only policy for population control. But having said that, now the fertility rate and the median age among different states in India is dramatically wide. So the states in the south, the median age is somewhere around 35, but for the overall country, it's 25. So it's a 10-year gap, and it's entirely due to GDP growth, economic prosperity, education, and all of that. And that's really will be the only way that India will go about it.
I mean, it's really a function of prosperity, that the size of families in the big cities have already come down, and you're seeing that spread out into the smaller towns. Villages still, because of mortality rates, infant mortality rates, still have more children, but it's coming with the prosperity. It naturally follows into the family, and because of the failed family planning policies way back in the 70s, it's very difficult to have a diktat that says we're going to go out and have only 2 children or a one-child policy like China. That's just not on the cards in the Indian context.
This is the last question. It's got to be quick. And
Praveen, you alluded to the fact that the actual GDP values of India may not be very accurate. There is a notion that the real GDP of India is probably much higher than what we know, because the measurement system is based on the production. Recently, there was some change they brought up, and it may help a little bit, but why don't they measure GDP based on consumption like all the other countries do?
So India has moved to consumption-based.
Fully consumption based?
Now, so the inflation metric today is entirely based on consumer prices and consumption. So it's a basket of. So India has moved to that metric. But I mean, there is a lot of talk about the formal economy versus the informal economy, and there are all kinds of numbers that are floating around where the informal economy is 50% of the formal economy and all of that. There's no way to verify any of it, but I mean, we can only kind of draw lessons through proxies. Like I said, if Indians can buy $180 billion worth of gold in the last 15 years, clearly they're prosperous. But that's not necessarily accounted for in the GDP.
Great. Moderators, last rapid fire questions. One word answer, 3 questions. We're going to let Manjit off the hook on one of these, you'll see. Will there be a second term, yes or no, for the Modi administration?
Yes.
I don't predict.
Watch it.
Yes.
Yes. 2 yeses and a abstain. This panel next year at the Milken Conference, upbeat or negative?
Upbeat.
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 Okay. Last one. This is the one I'm going to let Manjit off for obvious reasons. He's an interested participant here. IPL champion at the May 24th final for the Indian Premier League.
So we actually sponsor 5 of the teams, so it's hard for me to pick one, but I'll pick my my home state, Chandigarh.
Chandigarh?
Yeah.
Chennai Super Kings for the
Chennai
fourth time.
Super Kings. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our panel.
Thank you.
Did I say really?